The Switch 2 Pro controller released right next to the Switch 2 system, and naturally I had to pick one up, mostly because the Joy-Cons are fairly limited in the travel for the joysticks and just overall ergonomics. After my experiences with the Switch 1 Pro controller, which I'm still using now, so it lasted basically the entire generation for the Switch 1 and now into the Switch 2. But it seemed like Nintendo took what they had with the Switch 1 Pro controller and upgraded, almost took it to the next level for this one. So they didn't necessarily reinvent the wheel when it comes to the form factor, nothing like that. But there are some pretty good improvements here that to me it makes this the best controller from Nintendo. I mean, some are saying that this is the best controller they've ever used, and with all factors taken into account here, they could be onto something. However, there's a whole other side of this equation when it comes to the Switch 2 Pro controller that also makes it one of the worst controllers. So in a way, it's the best worst controller that we've seen, which I'll explain exactly how all of that is coming together. So if you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. So the Switch 2 Pro controller released at the price of $85. So it is a high watermark, I guess, for Nintendo when it comes to their controller pricing outside of the Joy-Cons, which you could look at the Joy-Cons as two controllers, kind of. But for just the standalone single controller, we are now at the $85 threshold, which, yeah, not great. I mean, we're going in the wrong direction there. We're far away from the days of like the $20 Super Nintendo controller or something. But these also have a lot more functionality all the way around. Now, when I first picked this controller up, the thing that you'll notice immediately is the feel. It's this rubberized plastic almost, and I do think it helps to make this really feel even more quality. And when I say even more, the entire thing feels very solid. Like, Nintendo did a lot here to try to make this feel like one solid piece. You can tell it's not clearly because of like the plastic lines here, sure. But even looking around, there's no obvious spots for where screws go. So this is something I did notice with the Joy-Con controllers for the Switch 2, and it carries over here to the Pro controller. Now looking around, again, very similar setup to the Switch 1 Pro controller with a couple of differences. The C button very clearly right here, and then we also have a headphone jack. On the back, we do have two macro buttons. So we have GL and GR. That's something that the Joy-Con or the Switch 2 Joy-Con charge grip also has, but this was much more pronounced, obvious, marketed, that this had that equipped right out of the gate, which is pretty cool to see that from an official controller from Nintendo, as typically with, say, Xbox or Sony, you'd either have to buy an attachment, say, for the DualShock 4, or you'd have to get the Xbox Series Elite controller that does take you up to a whole other threshold of pricing. So I think it's interesting that Nintendo decided to throw those in there and then also build it in on an OS level where you can change it right from like the quick settings menu. The C button is used to then go into game chat where you can talk to your friends, video chat, share your screenshots and stuff, and video. I think this is in a good spot since it is difficult to accidentally hit. I guess you could slide off of this joystick and hit it, or even then it's kind of difficult from the D-pad. So this is kind of just where they decided to, and if you look right down the middle here, it is symmetrical. It just looks off because of where the placement of the two sticks are. The sticks themselves are glide sticks, I believe, as Nintendo refers to them, to where they're very quiet. And that's something that I think is an interesting strategy and something that they focused on here, where they retooled this so it's not making a click noise constantly. It still makes a noise, but it's not that loud click that you hear when somebody's like toiling away at Street Fighter or some kind of fighting game. Even A, B, X, and Y also have a more subtle sound coming out of it. Same with plus and minus. Although you do still have more of a micro click or micro switch click out of both share, snapshot, home, and even the C button. The D-pad is better. It's not incredible, but it is definitely better than what they turned in with the Switch 1 Pro controller, as it has more of a pivot on it. So if you press down the center, you can start to kind of rock around here, and you do feel a center point. Whereas the first revision of the Switch 1 Pro controller, it would just sink all the way down. There was like no pivot at all, and that was a serious issue, and Nintendo seemed to try to refine that over time. On the top, it's all standard stuff. ZL, ZR, R, L. I do like the two-tone look here, where you have underneath the joysticks, it almost has that very, very light gray. And then at the top here, same deal across. We have our player 1 through 4 indicator lights here that when turned on, we have it at green. And then we have our sync button alongside of our USB-C charge port. I will say battery life-wise, I think I've charged this thing 3 times since I got it day one. I did an unboxing for this on the initial stream for the Switch 2 when I got home with it. And I've been using this ever since. And I didn't necessarily run into, okay, like I think one time I ran into a situation where it told me that the battery was critically low and it had the red battery icon on the screen. Otherwise though, after so many days, even a week, I go, you know, maybe I will just go ahead and plug it in while I'm not using it to USB-C and let it charge. So I haven't really been in a situation where it's just outright died on me. And I think that, once again, lives up to what we've kind of expected out of Nintendo now, which are very good battery life out of their controllers. I mean, across the board, and in right now an environment where you have a PS5 controller that lasts a handful of hours, it is nice that you can turn to Nintendo and say, oh, that controller is 30 to 40 hours for a single charge. Now, you do have some features missing clearly that are on, say, a DualSense controller, like the adaptive triggers, the light bar, the touchpad. I mean, they have removed things from this. You do still have the digital triggers on the back here. Some people don't mind. I think it'd be nice to have analog triggers back, since that does help with racing games and now GameCube games, but Nintendo has kind of shied away from that, and they have cited differences with developers who seem to like digital triggers more. I don't know how much I necessarily buy that, but that's what they're saying. So to me, this is one of the better controllers I've used just outright. I mean, it is in the top tier for usability for consumers. However, if you have an issue with this controller, that's where it then goes to the other end of the spectrum. It becomes one of the worst controllers. In fact, we're going to go ahead and try to tear it down here and see just how bad it really is. Now, I've already let some of the kids use this. You could see, if you ever want to find out how durable a controller, really just anything is, let like a 6-year-old try to play some games with it for a time. They'll drop it, they'll spin it around, they'll do all kinds of stuff to it. And you can see it's taken a couple of drops here, and it's mostly marked it up. The thing I've noticed about the rubberized plastic is, while I think it does feel good to use here in the hand and stuff, it will not only show fingerprints, actually, because it absorbs a lot of the oils or moisture from your hands. It will get scratched and scuffed like this if it takes a drop onto a hard surface. And then you have what looks like kind of like white specks sort of around here where it gets torn up. So because of that, I think this will end up showing just more wear over time as you go along throughout the generation versus the Switch 1 Pro controller. But with that said, let's try to tear this thing down. As I mentioned, there are no obvious screws here, and well, after looking around just to see what we had to do, this whole front facing is glued down. Well, it has adhesive strips underneath, so I have to see how exactly, say, just a regular person would tackle this if something went wrong. So I'm picturing maybe a spill or some sticky hands or something where somebody's pressing buttons after eating and it gets stuck and you're like, I gotta clean the buttons out. Normally you'd flip it over, look for some screws, open it up, take the buttons out, clean them, and then put it back together. Here, though, we have to get a little creative. I have a spudger that I'm going to attempt to use. I don't want to apply any heat immediately because I do think that if, say, a normal person thought, oh, let's just hit it with heat, a hairdryer or something, you may end up melting these caps or the buttons. So let's see what happens without any heat if I can remove this easily. I think this might be a good entry point up here by the shoulder button. It is clipped in, so I already popped a clip. I'm assuming we have adhesive strips and clips that are holding this down, but it looks like as soon as you can remove that clip here, I should be able to run around with the spudger. All right, making some progress. I get the spudger underneath, twist it a little bit, listen for some of that adhesive to break, and then continue to move around. It looks like it's also maybe stuck down in the middle here as well. It's almost like pulling one big plastic sticker off, really, is what I'm dealing with. I'm just looking for some of the other clips to pop up here carefully. If you can apply heat, this should lift up much cleaner much easier, but I also know many people out there aren't necessarily going to have the tools to just start blasting it with heat correctly. Otherwise, you may, again, melt some stuff. But after getting enough of it up here, I did a lift. Let's see if we're okay underneath. Everything looks fine. The adhesive strips didn't really move much, which is good. And it stuck to this side, also good. And you can see, I mean, all the way around the buttons here we have it. And you would want that. You don't necessarily want the plastic, the way it's set up here, to become loose around any of the buttons, or that would maybe even interfere if it started to lift up over time. This is plastic, so you can get it to bend and warp as you go along. So it makes sense why they had so much adhesive. Doesn't necessarily make as much sense as to why they went this route, other than to try to make it appear more premium without any obvious screws. Because you can see once that comes up, there's screws all over the place here. All Phillips head screws, which is nice, not dealing with any tri-wing screws. So let's see what happens when we remove these. Also keep in mind, I have not seen the battery yet. So in the Switch 1 Pro controller, it was pretty easy to get to the battery. A few screws and you were there and you could replace it. Here though, we're going in through the front to get to it, and that's something that clearly could go bad, or just have issues and has to be replaced. So hopefully, once I get these screws out, this can lift and we can get to the battery. So the screws came out okay, and then these two plastic pieces were sort of floating there afterwards, so sort of just popped them up and away from there. And now we have to figure out how to remove, I guess, this center piece from the grip. Actually, it looks like it just sort of wanted to pop right out of there. So we have quick flip over, our buttons, the membrane stuff. So in a way, it's still annoying to get to peel the top part off. Getting the buttons though, not bad. So you can just go ahead and change these out or clean them if you have to. It's kind of its own separate piece. And then we have actually quite a bit down here with where the connections are. It almost looks like it is. So this is all like a ribbon. It's almost one big ribbon cable, kind of, the way that this connection is made at the bottom there. Can also get to the D-pad right away here as well. So we can get a good look at that, which you can see immediately. Look at that little piece of plastic there. It sort of allows this guy to pivot on top. It's actually surrounded by this piece of rubber there. You can see. So with that, and this guy on top, you do get a pretty nice little pivot there. Definitely better than the first Switch Pro controller. It's something Nintendo managed to improve over time. People were noting that the D-pad felt better as the generation went along for different Pro controller revisions, and it just seems like they're starting off right away with at least the idea of having a decent enough pivot there. I'm sure people who are really into, say, Tetris will be able to comment more so than I can with this, but at least from, say, platforming, those kind of games so far, from what I've seen, it is better than the Switch 1 Pro controller, at least. We also have a good look at our glide sticks, and so here's how Nintendo is doing this, and it's kind of hard to see, unfortunately, with this, but you can sort of see this ring almost around the edges here. It's like this stuff right back here. It's this very similar in terms of the color here. It's almost that lighter gray. And so this doesn't really run into much other than that, okay? That sort of stops it. And what happens is it seems to stop there rather than running into maybe the plastic edge or perimeter around the base stick here, okay? So you don't get any kind of real click. There's still like a sound when you do it, but it's very much muffled compared to what we've been used to in the past with other controllers. So I think it's actually a pretty cool design. I'm curious about just the overall, because I assume if you just start, like, if we ever get a Mario Party or something that makes you go, oh, just start doing the Mario Party 1 thing, I almost wonder if that'll grind down sort of the edges for it. But at least for now, out of the box, even after like a month or so of, a little more, month and a half of play, nothing like that. No real debris that seems to be forming in there. See if we can get the cap off this guy, which that's on there pretty good. So I had to really rip at this thing to get the cap off, and you could see that stick is very long, actually, compared to some other controllers. And even the way that they have it designed here, it looks like it's almost designed to click in after it gets to a certain point. So they're trying really hard to keep this stick in place when it's being moved around. Again, all that I think working into trying to make the controller just feel very solid, but also very quiet. Up here, we have 1, 2, and I think there's 2 more all the way in the back. And that seems to cover, I believe, the top part here with our shoulder buttons. We also have 2 screws that are hidden. They're kind of hard to see. They're in these recesses here, and there's one in there. Looks pretty straightforward Phillips head screws, but they're all black, so they're already kind of hard to look through there and see because it has like a shadow to it. There we go. So I had a couple of screws at the top again with the shoulder buttons. These 2 down here. I'm hoping that should allow us to get this main unit away from the grip on the back. Spotted 2 more black screws up top here. Seems like they are holding on to, it's like right under the shoulder button. Seems like they are holding on to the back grip though. Oh, we have the top piece at least came off. So we're getting there. The quest for the battery continues, which I did, because it's still plugged in with the battery. As I'm messing around trying to get the stuff off, I hit the home button. The switch is now on upstairs, so who knows what people up there think. There's 2 more hidden all the way under here. Again, black screws covered basically by shadows and stuff, so you can't really see it easily. Looks like these are going to be smaller. So we're going to be dealing with some different size screws here as we go a little further in. Oh, and make sure you have a magnetic screwdriver of some kind. Some of these screws are down here again in the grip or back here by the shoulder button. If you lose this and it falls in there, you're going to be trying to shake and rattle it around to get that out of there. And then if it falls out and it jumps on you, who knows where it goes from there. Okay, I've spotted some more screws, but I need to take the shoulder buttons out to get to them. Once again, have a new size screw and threading. So we'll have to try to remember that goes there. It's not looking great right now for repairability. Oh, we have some movement. Actually, I should probably make sure I unplug. So we have 2, we can see 2 cables here plugged in. Those would be for the rumble motors on either handle. I would suggest unplugging those. I'm kind of imagining some people getting annoyed at this stage because of all that's happened and just ripping it out of there. And there you go, rumble motor. So let's go ahead and unplug those. Okay, we're good there. Let's see if we can work this center board out. Okay, it's free. Had to just sort of work this around it. And there we go. That's the main grip with our rumble motors down there, this side and over here, as well as our back buttons. So what you have is, you see this cable is kind of divided into, well, this connector is divided into 2 cables there. One is for the rumble motor, and the other one's for the back button there. So they're just plugging into the same port. Again, that's all one piece, goes to the side. I guess you could customize the grip somewhat. It's just, I really, at this point, I'm having a hard time recommending anyone even attempt to take this thing apart. But let's say you had battery issues. This is as far as you have to go because there's our battery. We made it. It just took a lot to get to it. It is modular. It's a 1070 milliamp hour battery. I'm also noticing that both sticks, the left and right sticks, you can see they plug in here and here. They are modular. So that's actually pretty good to have both these being modular in case you have drifting issues. Just again, keep in mind, you have to go pretty far to get to it. I am going to unplug the battery since it's still connected to the switch upstairs as all this is happening. So there we go. We are now disconnected from the battery, which is usually the first thing that I would recommend people do when they try to take something like this apart, but it ends up being one of the last things. Also, now that all the screws are out, it just sort of unclips and comes off of the board here, which again, we can see all of our connectors now. Unfortunately, the USB-C charge port is not modular. So if you do damage to that, it would have to be fully desoldered and replaced. I have to see if that lines up as, I mean, I would expect it to line up to a pretty standard USB-C port. So you should be able to get these, but you would have to, 1, tear it down this far, and 2, be able to desolder and put a new one on. These are, I'm trying to think if these are, they're about the same as I used to have to do these ports here and there. Controllers, yes, that was a big one, but also on different systems that had charge ports similar to these with the number of teeth on the back there. You can see the connections. So it was annoying, but it's not impossible. However, we do have a button directly next to it, so if maybe you use hot air to be able to lift the port easily, you'd have to be careful with that since this is prone to melting without without too much heat. Now I am looking at our headphone jack here. It does appear, yes, we have a connector to it, that it is modular. So that is good news because this is something that would also be prone to failure where a headphone is plugged in and then it breaks off and all of a sudden you now have a headphone jack that does not work anymore, or worse, the system thinks there's always something plugged in here. That is the most frustrating part, especially if you can't get it back out, because then you do lose core functionality and the system will expect you to be listening through these headphones at all times. So let's talk about what we've learned here today. The Switch 2 Pro controller is high quality. I mean, just looking internally at it, taking it apart, going piece by piece, this isn't something that Nintendo maybe phoned in or kept very much the same as the Switch 1 Pro controller, moved it over, and that was it. This is a completely different controller. Even though you look at the front, it looks very much the same. Internally, they really did redesign this completely. The sticks themselves are interesting the way that they feel when using. They're quieter, they're the glide sticks, so the controller is, I think, a really, really sound ergonomic setup. And I think in general, playing games with it for the consumer, the gamer, who isn't thinking about having to take it apart, it is a top tier controller. However, it's probably one of the worst controllers I've ever seen to have to tear down. And I cannot recommend anyone doing this. And that is a shame because one of the thing that's the most prone to failure clearly would be something like the battery. And that's one of the last things that comes out, as you can see. The buttons, while those are also prone to failure, are a bit easier to get out. Now you would just need a fine point Phillips head screwdriver, as these are like one of the first things that does get removed after unscrewing it. You'll just have to peel up that top piece, okay, that's covering it, and then you can get to it, clean the buttons, put it back. That also includes the D-pad if you have issues there, and since, I mean, let's face it, sticky buttons, spills into the controllers, that is a common thing that happens. There's at least a somewhat easy way to get to it and fix it. I'm just more so thinking about the battery as being an issue and the fact that it was so easy to access in the Switch 1 controller. It is a shame that they went this route and just made it very difficult to get to. So it is legitimately the best, worst controller I've ever used. Best to actually use in games, worst to have to fix or replace parts or do anything with when you get beyond really peeling this off and then unscrewing this part. It is, kind of a nightmare. But let me know what you guys think about this down below in the comments with the Switch 2 Pro controller. Did you pick one up for your Switch 2 system? And what do you think about it beyond just using it maybe to play in a game when it comes to actually taking it apart? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.